Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with the first video in a new series. This is the chapter analysis series, going over all the chapters from Avatar Legends Book 1, City of Echoes, the Jin focused novel. So this is a brand new Avatar novel series focused on the unsung heroes of the Avatar world, and this first book is about Jin, who of course is the girl that Zuko goes on a date with in 215, The Tales of Ba Sing Se, specifically the tale of Zuko. A minor character that most fans remember pretty fondly, but we ultimately don't get to know all that much about. She makes very minor appearances kind of later as like a complete background character in one scene. There's a comic that kind of is focused on her. It's a short story, but we really don't get to learn that much about her, whereas the whole significance of this book is that it highlights that actually she was much more involved in that kind of Ba Sing Se arc than you thought. While the main characters were off doing all that crazy stuff from City of Walls and Secrets all the way to Crossroads of Destiny, Jin was doing other stuff in the background that sometimes crossed over like just before or just after events of those arcs, and it's super interesting to see that play out as this book goes along. So just before we get into the actual chapter analysis for chapter 1, I do want to just explain how I'm going to do this series and also the benefits that you can get by becoming a channel member or Patreon member in terms of early access to videos in this series. So the plan is to do it a little bit differently than previous chapter analysis series for the Kyoshi, Yang Chen, and Roku novels, where I won't be doing a video on every single chapter. I'll still cover all the chapters. It just won't be the case where there are 49 chapters in this book. There won't be 49 videos. My aim is probably to do about 30 something videos, meaning there will be some videos where it is one chapter, one video, but there will be quite a few of them where it will be grouping two chapters into one video. Basically trying to get a kind of balance of not kind of having an excessive number of videos, but keeping the level of detail up, basically. So there's still going to be tons of analysis. Like I said, I'll touch on every chapter as we go through this series. As for the exclusive stuff, if you join the channel membership thing on YouTube at the Avatar tier, you will gain access to exclusive videos I do on the channel. And while there is a novel coming out, that basically means you will get early access to a bunch of different videos in this series as it goes forward. And the same is true when you come in at the equivalent tier on Patreon. So basically this comes down to the difference in schedule of when I actually release the episodes publicly and then when I just have them kind of recorded or ready to go public on the channel. Usually in the past I have been able to get through these videos pretty comfortably where I have a bit of a backlog, and it mainly the main thing delaying me typically is just that I do have other videos I need to do apart from the chapter analysis series, and I can only release so many videos at a time without just completely swamping people's feeds with all these different videos. So I have to keep the cadence down to like 1 or 2 a day, meaning that I can give people like that kind of jump ahead if they are channel members. So straight away at the start, it's this situation where you'll notice chapter 1 and chapter 2 are just out publicly on the channel. Chapter 3 is available immediately if you are a channel member or on Patreon. Now that chapter 3 video will go public for everyone like the day after or the next day. And that will be kind of replaced in a way where you'll gain access to chapter 4 a little bit before everyone else. It's not going to be super kind of strict like that, but it'll be done in sort of chunks where you'll always be ahead as a channel member. Sometimes that's 1 video, sometimes it's 3. There might be a situation where you're up to maybe 10 videos ahead of everyone else. It just depends on how easily I get through the videos and how the actual videos that I need to get out there kind of goes. But that is the rough idea of how that's going to work. And the way that will be done is on YouTube in the community posts tab. There will be exclusive posts that have links to either 1, 2, 3 videos, however many it is. And on Patreon, it will just be the same. There'll be an exclusive post with those links to those videos. But like I said, all of them will eventually go up publicly. It's just, you know, it'll be a little bit slower for the public thing, just because I have to schedule them and stuff like that. So let's jump into the chapter 1 analysis here. Interestingly, it does have like a part 1, chapter 1. Now, the chapters don't like reset when you go into part 2. The distinction of what each part is not like, I would say, super distinct. It mostly seems to be a thing where there is a little bit of a sense of like, at the end of part 1, there kind of is a bit of a cliffhanger to go into part 2. Like an event happens in Jin's life, kind of seems to be what they do with that. But yeah, here we are, chapter 1. There's no chapter titles here, it's just called chapter 1. Straight away, timeline. Where are we in the timeline, mainly when it comes to the episodes? We are towards the start of City of Walls and Secrets. Now, the main way you can tell where we are here is, of course, 1, we are before Zuko and Jin go on the date, which is in the following episode 215. The reason we can tell it's before that and it's in City of Walls and Secrets is because we immediately get reference in these early chapters to Pau's family tea house, which is the tea house that Zuko and Iroh, or Lee and Mushi, work at. Now, in City of Walls and Secrets, you see them kind of preparing their apartment. You basically see their first day on the job because Iroh puts on the apron and it's too small for him. So when Jin eventually does arrive for the first time at the tea house and sees them, it feels like they actually have been on the job for at least a few days, meaning that we're early in City of Walls and Secrets, but not right at the start. But we are still early because some of the later scenes, like Zuko and Jet fighting when Jet tries to confront him, that hasn't happened yet. We will get to that in a few chapters' time. So just to keep that in mind, we are right in the middle of, you know, one of the more important episodes of Avatar, City of Walls and Secrets, where we properly do get introduced to Ba Sing Se. So you know that we're close-ish to some of those events beginning to happen, but it's not going to be the case where you have to wait 10 chapters to get into the kind of meat of what's going on in this story. So what chapter 1 is about is it's basically just introducing you to kind of what is Jin's status quo in Ba Sing Se. And just learning a lot of background about her in terms of, like, she's a refugee. When did she come here? Who's her family in the city? Who are her friends in the city? What does she kind of do? And then we begin to set up a little bit of the plot in that she's going to make a delivery with Suzu to Pau's family tea house, which is where, of course, Zuko is. So this is where she's going to basically meet Lee, Zuko, for the first time. So straight away they do immediately bring in some stuff that you know about in this first chapter, but it still keeps the focus on the kind of impact of some of the stuff you didn't really know about, because the actual kind of cliffhanger of the end of the chapter is Jin reflecting on basically the death of her parents. So there is kind of tragedy here as much as there's, you know, positivity. So what we find out here is that Jin's status quo in the city is that it's her and her grandfather, who she calls Gong Gong. Now, I don't believe that is his name. I think Gong Gong is just meant to be an affectionate term for grandfather, but that's what she calls him. They are refugees in the city. In later chapters, they reveal that it's been like 3 years. I think it's more meant to be like 3 and a bit years, because they refer to the early days of Jin arriving. She's 12, and then I think they refer to the fact that she's 16 later on in the book. So you can tell that, like, you know, okay, like 3 and a bit years have passed, not just 3 years full stop. But that's that situation. You find out that her grandfather is ailing, so she does need some help, and where that help comes from is that her best friend's name is Suzu, and Jin is effectively considered and treated as part of Suzu's family. She's part of the Wen family. Suzu's full name is Su Yin Wen. So that's a really fun little detail there, where she has the same name as Lin's sister, Toph's daughter, Su Yin, but we have the family name Wen. So we get introduced to Suzu, we get grandmother Wen, Mama Wen, and Susu's sister is Little Ming. Susu's father does get referenced later on. I think it might be the next chapter we get introduced to that. But effectively, he's not really part of the family, is sort of the kind of way you have to kind of think about it here. This is the core dynamic. It's the grandmother, the mother, the two daughters, and then Jin is also basically considered part of the family. And they help Jin kind of, support Gong Gong as well. And this is so important. They describe that, early on when they arrived in the city, we do get this detail of when they arrived, Gong Gong had an injured leg, and so Jin was the one who had to sort of queue up with the food token to get their food, but she misplaced it and thought they weren't going to get any food. And this is where she met Suzu for the first time, who just comes in out of nowhere, gives in a token, Jin gets the food, and it's this really cool meeting, but they end up running away because it was a fake token. And Jin is just taken aback by this girl to be so brazen like that in the middle of all of this. And just like that, Suzu kind of immediately takes Jin and they become friends kind of after that. It's even described here of just like that I became kind of one of her hapless victims, friends. So Suzu is this very energetic, confident character who, in a way, you can see how she's kind of almost like destined for more than just the bakery that her family works at, because she's just liked by everyone. And if they weren't in the lower ring, there is this potential for her if she had more opportunities. Whereas Jin is a little bit more grounded. She's just happy to kind of get through on things and get by. They kind of emphasize this with regards to like the bakery. Because the family has helped her so much, Jin kind of helps out at the bakery. Jin likes the baking, putting the ingredients together, that kind of basic stuff. Whereas Suzu does it when she has to, but is more like, oh, is there a delivery to be made? Great, we can get away from here, we can go see different parts of the city. She's really eager to go out and kind of meet the different people, whereas Jin maybe isn't as into that side of thing, which is kind of funny with the way the book ends up kind of going, where Jin ends up going all over the city, including like the upper and middle rings. Whereas this is very focused early on the lower ring of the city. So this is the place where, like, if you watch the City of Walls and Secrets, when Judy introduces Team Avatar to the lower ring, it's really just described as this, like, oh, you don't want to be here. They frame it in a nice way, but also at the same time get across that you kind of don't really want to be here. Even in, like, some of the other tales, you kind of see that, like, okay, yeah, Iroh nearly gets mugged and stuff like that, but that there is other positivity stuff going on here. And I think what they're really emphasizing with, like, Jin and the Wen family is that the people in the lower ring stick together because they are all refugees, and they realize they do mostly all need to help each other out because they're all newcomers. And this is where the chapter gives you that first insight into the sort of conspiracy within the walls, and that, like, oh yeah, we don't call them refugees. We're not meant to, because if they're refugees, that suggests there's a war going on, and there isn't a war going on. There's no war within the walls, It's the first tease of the idea that is enforced, basically, that you are not meant to say those things, which is interesting. They don't overdo it on that front, because obviously, I guess the policing in the lower ring, it doesn't really need to be anything fancy, and it's more in the higher rings where that's much more heavily enforced. But yeah, you can see that this is the kind of structure that Jin has, heavily connected into the Wen family, and it's kind of required because we don't learn the full details about her grandfather at this point. Like, they describe that, like, his leg was injured on their way to Ba Sing Se when they became refugees, when the Fire Nation attacked their home. But he's recovered from that leg injury, and it's actually more his mental condition that's beginning to kind of fail. And that's why she really needs to have the support of Suzu and her family overall. So, yeah, most of what we do here is at the bakery, get introduced to everyone. And the grandmother is the one who is the kind of master baker. her daughter, of course, who is Susu's mother, more runs the kind of like front of house in terms of like organizing orders and stuff like that. And then it is Susu and Jin who do the delivering, which is kind of what they immediately go to set up here. After some fun moments where you see just how considered part of the family Jin is. Like the grandmother is like, oh, I left a treat for you under here, and then everyone else gets annoyed, like, why does Jin get special treatment? But it's because the others have already had some of these kind of like tarts like the earlier on in the day, but Jin still gives a bit to little Ming, of course, and then the two of them, Susu and Jin, are sent out on the delivery to Pao's family tea house, which, if you know that detail, and to be fair, I would say that there probably are a bunch of people out there, unless you're kind of a hardcore fan, just the detail that, oh yeah, the first tea shop that Zuko and Iroh worked in was called that, isn't necessarily the most obvious piece of information. But if you know your stuff, you know that like, there's the connective tissue of like, Jin has been in the tea house multiple times before she asks Zuko out. Here's going to be her properly coming into contact with him in that way. So you can sort of see the setup that is about to happen here, which is interesting. So yeah, they make their way there. There's a fun kind of little detail here of like, Jin is given an egg tart, and it's kind of like, is that kind of a reference to the Great Divide, where they specifically show you on screen an egg tart, and Aang has the, is that an egg custard tart there moment, and they describe that like a fun kind of detail that she really does think that the Wen stuff is the best baked goods in the city, and she's tried a lot of them because, of course, refugees coming into the Lower Ring means the Lower Ring actually ends up having a lot of different food options from all over the Earth Kingdom because everyone's a refugee, basically. So they describe like, there's chocolate mousse, lychee nut, gooier Southern Earth Kingdom concoctions, and all this sort of stuff here. That's kind of cool. But then you get the one fun detail that kind of shows maybe some of like, Susu kind of maybe destined for more, is that they kind of highlight Susu is the one who basically made the kind of backpacks that they use to carry the baked goods on their deliveries. Like, she made them out of like cloth and bamboo, and it's just this random note that they've made that like, oh, she made these things. They don't highlight that she's some master inventor, but just that like, hey, she just did it. She made them because they needed them, and that's another part of how kind of impressive she is. But yeah, they make their way off to Pao's family tea house. On the way, we get an interesting detail here where Jin smells kind of smoke just from, all the restaurants and stuff like that. And this makes her remember back to the time when she kind of became a refugee, when her home was attacked and she had to leave, the desperate times. I'm back there again, remembering my father's expression when he lifted me out of bed and pushed me into Gong Gong's arms, my hand in Gong Gong's when he pulled me away from the village, whispered at me to hurry, hurry. On top of the big hill, we stopped to catch our breath, and I looked behind us. All the houses in the village burning, the flames licking the night sky, red, yellow, gold. So you learn more details about this as we go on, but this is basically the Fire Nation attacking Dai Ying. This is where Jin is from. And so, we find out that, okay, her father put her into, her grandfather's arms to get away, but he never made it. You'll learn what happened to her mother in a couple of chapters' time. So it does get addressed, that situation, and that they are, in fact, dead. And obviously straight away, this is a little bit of a continuity point, because in terms of the information we knew about Jin beforehand from the old Nickelodeon website, it basically said that Jin's parents were still alive and doing their best to make things good in the Lower Ring. They've clearly taken a different direction with this full novel about the character to make things kind of different with regards to her family background. I think it's perfectly fine to do that in this case, because broadly speaking, the way that like publishing and Avatar Studios in general has treated the old Nickelodeon website information is that, we'll base stuff on it when we can, but we're not going to be beholden to it. because it's not really accessible kind of anymore. And I think they make decisions like that for the best, and that I think it makes for a better story here, because the whole point is to put Jin in a situation where like she maybe doesn't have a lot of control herself because she has to look after her grandfather and she's very reliant on another family to kind of help her out, that sort of thing. Whereas, you know, she has that stability of just her whole family's here. It kind of changes the way that kind of goes. So I'm perfectly fine with that. We'll address kind of other points of continuity as we get to them in different chapters. And then the final bit in the chapter is just addressing the idea of like, they kind of walk past these bulletin boards, and Jin describes them as like, these are bulletin boards where people put up like portraits, sketches, just notes about people looking for family members. Because of course, so many refugees flooding into the city, of course people get separated all the time, so just trying to reunite with different people. And she talks about how she thought that one day she might see her own name there, or her own face on that wall. With the idea that hopefully someone's looking for her, that maybe her parents are alive, or maybe the reverse, that's like someone puts her parents up on those walls, and there's a sign that there's still some hope. But it says here, I never saw my parents again after that day. It hurt so much to keep like looking at the walls, but I kept doing it. And so the idea is she stopped eventually doing this after a couple of months. And then we end on the interesting note of like the difference in a way between Jin and Suzu. This kind of one thing that's just inherently different about their lives. As close as I am to Suzu, and as much as I've adapted to my new life here, that's something that she will never understand. Something that I can't explain to her because she's always grown up surrounded by her whole family. And like Suzu's asking her, what are you looking at? And Jin just says nothing. Because, you know, nothing, because there's no use looking at those walls, at those bulletin boards. It only leads to disappointment. So this is this thing that's kind of haunted Jin this whole time for these last 3 and a bit years, is just she's still not quite over the loss of her parents and just the situation that she's in, even though she has a certain amount of stability in her life because of like the Wen family and having Suzu with her. So we end that chapter, this opening chapter, with, again, they're on their way to the Pow's family tea house, but they're not there yet. So it sets up like chapter 2 to be like, okay, we're going to get our first proper connected moment in the series, in the book. But yeah, that is the end of the chapter 1 analysis video. Again, I had this up for most of the video, but if you want early access going forward to more videos in this series, definitely become a YouTube channel member at the Avatar tier, or a Patreon at the equivalent tier. And I'll mention this at the start of a bunch of these videos as well. But otherwise, let me know what your thoughts are on chapter 1 in the comments below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.